to me when you have a workforce that is afraid for their jobs, that fear that maybe you're going to be replacing them. When you say we're going to be AI first, that immediately tells me people aren't first. Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making AI approachable and actionable. My name is Paul Roetzer. I'm the founder and CEO of SmarterX and Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Each week, I'm joined by my co-host and Marketing AI Institute Chief Content Officer, Mike Kaput, as we break down all the AI news that matters and give you insights and perspectives that you can use to advance your company and your career. Join us as we accelerate AI literacy for all. Welcome to episode 146 of the Artificial Intelligence Show. I'm your host, Paul Roetzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput. As always, we are recording on Monday, May 5th, about 11 a.m. Eastern time. We are expecting maybe some announcements this week. So time stamping usually matters on this podcast every week, as everybody always drops something on a Monday after we record this thing, it seems. So today's episode is brought to us by a couple of our marquee events. So first up, we have the AI for B2B Marketers Summit. This is presented by Intercept, who's been a great partner of Marketing Institute over the last few years. This virtual summit is packed with incredible sessions from top B2B marketing experts. It's all happening virtually on Thursday, June 5th, starting at noon Eastern time. That's 12 o'clock Eastern time. You'll learn real-world strategies to use AI to grow better, create smarter content, build stronger customer relationships, and much more. Thanks to our sponsors, there is even a free ticket option, so you can go and choose that free ticket option. There is a paid option for private registration, so information's not shared with the sponsor. And then there's also a paid option for on-demand access. So you can go to bsummit.ai. Again, that's b2bsummit.ai and learn more about that event. It is coming up, 1 month from today. I swear, like when the calendar changes to the next month, I actually realize like how much I have to now do before the month that is coming. When we're in April, June 5th seemed like really far away, and now it's May 5th and it is no longer far away. So apparently I need to add some things to my to-do list after we're finished recording today. All right. And then next up, if you're ready to get smarter about AI and marketing, don't miss MAYCON 2025. This is our flagship event. It is back for the 6th year in Cleveland, Ohio. It is happening October 14th to the 16th. We have already announced more than 24 speakers. You can go check those people out. We have incredible sessions coming up. We have a bunch of our top rated speakers from past years coming back, a bunch of new voices and perspectives we're bringing to the mix as well. I'm really excited about that lineup and how it's coming together. Lots more announcements still coming. Prices go up May 31st, and basically like every month they just go up. I think it's like another $100 or so. So you want to get in early, get the best pricing possible, do it before May 31st. Go to maycon.ai. That is MAICON.ai. There are group tickets available as well. So if you're planning on bringing a group of say 5 or more, make sure to reach out to us and we can help get that set up as well. All right. It's sort of moved into the AI first age, Mike. We've got some new research from Microsoft that I'm really excited to talk about, and a bunch of other updates, including, first time I can recall as they're happening, the rollback of one of these frontier models because it was not behaving the way it was supposed to behave. So let's get into all of it.
All right, Paul. So the first main topic today is the rise of what we're calling AI first, or as we actually prefer to talk about it, AI forward companies. So in the past several weeks, a number of prominent CEOs have released memos declaring their intention to be AI first. So we actually talked a couple weeks ago about the first CEO to kind of get a lot of press for doing this, which was Shopify CEO Tobi Lütke. And he is now being joined by CEOs at Duolingo and Box, both of whom released their own AI first memos this past week, basically declaring that their companies are all in on AI, and AI literacy in some form or another will be a baseline expectation for all employees. So Duolingo's CEO, Louis van Ahn, wrote in his memo, quote, Duolingo is going to be AI first. And he said that means the company will need to rethink much of how they work to prioritize what AI is capable of and now makes possible in the workforce. And to start, he said Duolingo will gradually stop using contractors to do work that AI can handle. AI use will be part of what the company looks for when hiring. It'll be a part of performance reviews, and headcount will only be given if a team can automate more of their work with AI. He did also reiterate that Duolingo cares about its employees. It is not looking to replace their current employees with AI, but rather augment them. Now, Box CEO Aaron Levy released a very similar memo that hit a lot of these same notes. Now, while all this is going on, Microsoft actually published its annual Work Trend Index annual report that seems to confirm, at least at a high level, this is a macro trend of where we're headed. So they said that data from 31,000 workers across 31 countries, quote, point to the emergence of an entirely new organization, what they call a frontier firm. They define a frontier firm as, quote, a company powered by intelligence, on tap, human agent teams, and a new role for everyone, agent boss. And the report claims these firms are already taking shape, with 81% of those surveyed saying they expect AI agents to be moderately or extensively integrated into their company's AI strategy in the next 12 to 18 months. So, Paul, maybe first here, give me your thoughts on this recent round of AI first CEO memos. I mean, you're a CEO actively considering all of these issues, working on AI literacy and transformation. What do you like about these letters? Anything they can improve? We should expect to see more of these, I would guess.
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit when we talked about the Qwen from Shopify. That I do expect, within the next month or so, pretty much every tech CEO is going to have to now do their own internal memo, which they will all also leak on LinkedIn and X. So I think it's like table stakes now that if you're a tech CEO, you pretty much have to like put your stake in the ground about what your vision is for an AI first or AI forward or AI native or AI emergent or like whatever people want to, call these things. I think that's going to be required. And I actually think it's a good thing. Like I feel like we need way more transparency with our employee base, with workers about what we're doing as CEOs, how our vision is, how agents and automation are going to impact people's jobs, which, I think that they're kind of glazing over at the moment. And I think that's the kind of stuff people are going to want to hear more of. So just to recap for anybody who hadn't listened to our episode, where we talked about the Shopify one, which sort of, is the triggering event for these other ones coming. He had talked about using AI effectively is now fundamental expectation of everyone at Shopify. Totally agree with. It must be a part of prototype phase of any, new products, anything they're building, any features. They'll add AI usage questions, performance and peer reviews. Learning is self-directed, so they want people to be proactive about doing this. The headcount thing, everyone means everyone, like it's applying to all of them. So the Duolingo stuff, you started seeing the same concepts, a lot of these same ideas. And then Aaron Levy at Box, he released his last week, and his said primarily use AI to eliminate drudgery and move faster across the business. Encourage teams to use AI to automate more and save money, but primarily reinvest those savings. So again, he's trying to kind of hedge like, hey, this isn't a replacement thing. We're trying to do this, drive efficiency, and then reinvest those, which I believe. I mean, I think Aaron's a good leader in this space. He's very active on X, and this jives with how he, generally talks about things related to AI. He also said foster constant experimentation internally to find the best use case for AI, upskill every employee to be AI first over time and with more education and awareness, and then maintain strong governance and security practices with human in the loop still required for most areas. So, I think as you mentioned, Mike, you're seeing these kind of common threads across these, and they're all very short memos. Like most of these things are, 500 to 1,000 words. They're not, the expansive manifestos. So, I think that they're going to keep evolving, but I also think that they're just the first phase because employees are going to want more detail than this. They're very, very, kind of high level vision, I would say, versus like tactically, what does this actually mean to me as someone in HR, someone in finance, someone in marketing? Now, I liked the Microsoft report. I was giving a hard time to, I think it was McKinsey maybe recently, about how their data was like a year old already.
Yeah.
So kudos to Microsoft. They, you highlighted it, 31,000 full-time employees, knowledge workers that they did research, and it was from February to end of March 2025. So we're looking at month and a half old data here, which is great. That means this is actually really relevant to where they're at today. It's not a terribly long report. I would suggest people actually read the full
Yeah.
report if you have, it's probably take you 20 minutes, throw it in a notebook LM, ask it some questions, build a study guide based on it, whatever you need to do. I'll call out 3 key takeaways that sort of jumped out to me, Mike. So the first is this idea of the frontier firm, which you sort of highlighted is it's a new blueprint for mashing machine intelligence with human judgment. It's structured around this idea that intelligence is going to be always on demand, and that's different. We historically haven't just had this level of intelligence accessible to all of us. And it's going to be powered by these hybrid teams of humans plus agents that's going to let companies scale way faster. When it thinks about a frontier firm, it's looking at 5 core traits of organizational-wide AI deployment, advanced AI maturity, current AI usage, projected AI agent usage, and a belief that agents are key to realizing ROI. It does say that within the next 2 to 5 years, every organization will be on the journey to becoming a frontier firm. I agree with that. It led me back to the blog post I'd written, Mike, back in May of 2022, where I said the future of all businesses, AI or obsolete. And in that blog post, I sort of laid out that there was 3 types of firms. There was AI native, which is you built smarter from the ground up, infusing AI into all your business processes and teams. AI emergent, which is you're an existing company that evolves to become what they're calling a frontier firm, basically. And then obsolete is everybody else because they become irrelevant. The second key finding that jumped out to me is AI skilling and digital labor are top workforce strategies. So, Mike, you had kind of called this out a little bit. Their definition of an AI agent, again, it's always helpful to have this context. AI-powered system that can reason, plan, and act to complete tasks or entire workflows autonomously with human oversight at key moments. It's an interesting definition. An agent boss is a human manager of one or more agents. So I totally agree. We will all be agent bosses within their definition. But then the thing that really jumped out to me is the survey question was, as you consider the role of AI and agents in workforce and talent management, which strategies are your team or organization considering over the next, I think it was 12 months? And the number one thing was prioritizing AI-specific skilling of existing workforce was 47%. So AI literacy is the number one thing that people are focusing on. The second, maintaining headcount, but using AI as digital labor. The third, investing in maintaining employee morale, which they see as important as people worry about their jobs, is my guess here. But then interestingly, the other answers were using AI to reduce headcount, which 33% admitted to being part of their strategy. Increasing headcount to support business needs was 32%. Using AI to reduce headcount, but rewarding top performers, 32%, meaning you can pay your top people more if you don't have as many people anymore.
Yeah.
And then no change was only 28%. So in a couple of related data points, 51% of managers say AI training or upskilling will become a key responsibility for their teams. Within the next 5 years, 35% of managers are considering hiring AI trainers to guide employee addition or adoption in the next 12 to 18 months. So you're really starting to see this true shift where they literally said, amid the uncertainty, one signal is clear. AI literacy is now the most in-demand skill of 2025, according to LinkedIn. So Microsoft owns LinkedIn. They have access to data that you and I don't. Also rising are human strengths like conflict mitigation, adaptability, process automation, innovative thinking, showing that the future belongs to those who compare deep AI capabilities with the skills machines can't replicate, which to me is probably the most important thing they're highlighting here. And then the final third takeaway is the rise of human agent teams and impact on organizational charts, which again, they talk about kind of this meshing of these things into what they're calling a work chart versus an org chart, where you actually, scale around goals versus like specific functions and departments, which is kind of an interesting concept that I think we'll see start to play out a little bit more. So again, like the main thing for me is this increasing awareness and sense of urgency around AI literacy, which I am excited to see more organizations thinking in that way.
Yeah, just one kind of final thought here on the 2 sides of the job displacement coin. On one hand, 33% of people admitting they're going to reduce headcount seems crazy to me, like high, because I assume more
It's probably
have that
double that.
answer.
They just aren't
Right.
saying it.
So that seems interesting. But on the other side of this, just kind of putting a more optimistic lens on it, they cited some really interesting data that shows like why firms are looking to use digital labor. They said 53% of leaders say productivity must increase, but 80% of employees say they lack time or energy to do their work now.
Yep.
So this isn't all necessarily doom and gloom, though. In the next topic, we'll kind of talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, and semi-related, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. I actually, as I was going through this, was talking about this, these gaps. I ran a deep research project
Mm.
on ChatGPT while I was reviewing the PDF. And I said, I'm doing analysis on the potential impact of AI on knowledge work. I'd like to consider which industries and professions currently have a gap, meaning more open jobs than employees in the field that AI could fill. Because we talk all the time about job loss, but what we often don't touch on enough on this podcast is all these sectors where they don't have enough people. And like AI can fill that. Now, the thing I've said before is the risk you run here. So I'll pull up one. So education sector teachers was a huge one. So it said teacher shortages have become a national crisis. Recent analysis found that 22 to 23 school year, 406,000 teaching positions were either vacant or filled by underqualified instructors. Another one, legal sector, not one you would normally think about being a shortage of, but they said lawyers tend to cluster in urban centers, leaving rural communities underserviced. For instance, in Ohio, 75% of attorneys' practices in just 7 urban counties, leaving many of other 81 counties virtually no local lawyers. But then the one that jumped out to me was the finance one, because I've actually done talks for accounting firms, and this is one I've thought about. But they said one prominent example is a shortage of accountants and auditors. In recent years, the accounting workforce has seen a steep decline. The U.S. has around 340,000 fewer accountants in 2023 than just 5 years prior, in part due to baby boomer retirements. Approximately 75% of CPAs are boomers nearing retirement age. That's crazy.
That's wild.
But then, like, when we think about the impact, you could see the motivation to build an AI tech company that solves for this gap in accountants, CPAs. But by filling that gap, you actually accelerate the automation of the workforce, the remaining people. And that's the part where it's like, this isn't easy. This is going to be really messy how this gets solved. But like, there is financial motivation to build the solution to fill that gap. But by filling the gap, you actually decimate the workforce that's left. And we don't have time in this episode to like go into this, but these are the complexities we're going to have to deal with. And it's just fascinating when you start to kind of like peel the onion back, I guess, of like, where this is all going to play out.
So this does have a lot related to our second main topic, which is tracking even some more signals of AI job disruptions. We've talked about this many times on the podcast. It seems like things are accelerating a bit. So we wanted to kind of highlight a few interesting things that are standing out on this topic. So first here is a new report in The Atlantic says that recent college grads are struggling more than usual to find work, and that AI might be part of the reason. So unemployment for young degree holders has jumped to 5.8%, which is apparently an unusually high rate, even as the broader economy for the time being holds steady. And this report said even elite MBA grads are having trouble landing jobs. Law school applications are spiking, which is a classic move that happens during economic uncertainty. And economists that were interviewed for this report in The Atlantic suggest 3 overlapping causes. So first, the job market for young people never fully bounced back from the Great Recession and the pandemic. Second, the college degree is no longer the golden ticket it once was. Employers are posting fewer jobs that even require one. But the third most provocative theory is this is due to AI. Many entry-level jobs we've talked about many times involve synthesizing information, making presentations, writing reports, etc. The exact kind of stuff large language models are now capable of doing. So it's too early to say if this is truly causing this trend, but the timing, the sharpness of this trend, worth paying attention to. Now, second, Anthropic has actually announced an economic advisory council to study the impact of AI on work. They say they are bringing together, quote, a group of distinguished economists who will provide Anthropic with expert guidance on the economic implications of AI development and deployment. The council will advise Anthropic on AI's impact on labor markets, economic growth, and broader socioeconomic systems. So we are not the only people talking about this. Clearly, others are seeing a need to understand this better. And then on top of it all, you have stuff like the Stop Hiring Humans campaign, which is a marketing campaign that was recently run by a buzzy AI startup called Artisan that just raised $25 million by telling companies to stop hiring humans. Though ironically, it is hiring more humans itself. So this company is led by a 23-year-old founder, Jasper Carmichael Jack. And Artisan builds AI agents that right now handle outbound sales. So basically, they cold email leads like a junior sales rep would. And they released this like super controversial marketing campaign, which included billboards shouting literally stop hiring humans. And of course, this grabbed a ton of headlines. There was a bunch of backlash. There were unfortunately death threats about this. Behind the noise, though, Artisan is part of this fast-growing wave of startups trying to automate white-collar work. We talked about Mechanize last week as well. So Artisan says that it now is able to send out high-quality emails with near zero mistakes. They say they've signed 250 clients and passed $5 million in annual revenue. So despite their, controversial tactics, it seems like someone is buying their agents. So Paul, to kind of unpack this, I want to start with the Atlantic article really quick. Like, how much weight do you give their argument that AI could be this driving factor behind recent college grads struggling to find work?
It's an interesting article. I would say it was very much a hypothesis. Like they
Yes.
did not go into like great depth proving out this concept. So I'll read a quick excerpt from it because I think it's relevant context. So they say it's a novel economic indicator to look at this recent grad gap. It's the difference between the unemployment of young college graduates and the overall labor force. So going back 4 decades, young college graduates almost always have a lower, sometimes much lower unemployment rate than the overall economy because they're relatively cheap labor and have spent 4 years maintaining in a theoretically enriching environment. And it goes on to say, but last month's recent gap hit an all-time low. That is, today's college graduates are entering an economy that is relatively worse for young college grads than any month on record going back at least 4 decades. Then they say the strong interpretation of this chart, which they show this chart, and it is kind of a jarring chart to look at. It is a significant difference than historical data over 4 decades. So they say the strong interpretation is that it's exactly what one would expect to see if firms replaced young workers with machines. So, for example, they say, as law firms leaned on AI for more paralegal work, and consulting firms realized that 5 22-year-olds with ChatGPT could do the work of 20 recent grads, and tech firms turned over their software program to a handful of superstars working with AI co-pilots, the entry level of America's white-collar economy would contract, which is what they're basically saying appears to be happening here. And they said, and even if employers aren't directly substituting AI for human workers, high spending on AI infrastructure may be crowding out spending on new hires. I don't, again, they're just talking theoretically here,
Yeah.
hypothesis, and it's not even really a full-blown hypothesis. They're just kind of like throwing it out there. But I agree, this is what it would start to look like. It would start to look like, well, we're not really sure what AI agent impact is going to be, but we think that the 5 people currently on that team with full-blown training on how to use ChatGPT and build custom GPTs, they can probably do the work of what we would have hired the 10 interns for, the 10 full-time workers out of college for. And so I could absolutely see places like Deloitte and McKinsey and
Mm.
big accounting firms like just saying, hey, maybe we don't need as many hires here, and trying to play it out and see what happens, not knowing for sure if it's going to work, but basically just taking a flyer. Hey, the economy's not great. The tariffs are wrecking everything, and we might be heading toward a recession real fast. And let's just see if AI can't do this, and let's not hire as many people this year. I don't know for a fact that's what's happening, but it sure does make a lot of sense. And as a CEO, if I was the CEO of one of those big firms, it is probably the way I would be thinking about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Between the Atlantic article talking to economists and Anthropic's Economic Council, I know you've said many times on the podcast, like, why aren't economists talking about this
Yeah.
more? And these kind of almost feel to me like indicators of like economists maybe waking up and saying, wait a second.
Yes. Now the difficulty is still going to be one, I think it's great. We need more conversations like this. We need more articles about the topic. I love that Anthropic is building this council to do this. And I assume Anthropic's going to do this way. The concern I have, having talked with some leading economists who had, as of 6 months ago, no real interest in studying the impact of AI in the economy, thought it was overblown. We obviously didn't agree on that, but this is where they were at. Those economists who are being built into these like AI impact councils need a very in-depth understanding of what these AI models are currently capable of and where they're going. That has been my challenge talking to leading economists to date. Is it became very apparent very quickly that they were unaware of the current power of these models and the very near-term power of the models. And so how in the world are they supposed to model impact when economists, generally speaking, look at historical perspective to predict the future? And I don't know that you're going to learn what you need to learn by looking to the past. And so I think it's great that like Anthropic is doing this. I hope Google is doing something similar. It hasn't talked about it yet. I hope OpenAI is doing something similar, but like providing deep education and hands-on experience with the model so the economists have that perspective as they start to try and project out.
All right, so let's quickly talk about the impact of the stop hiring humans thing. So obviously, this is just meant to be like a PR stunt. It's meant to capture
Yeah.
attention. The company itself is raising money, hiring people. But like, do you think there is something here about like the overall feeling of it? Like, are we going to see more of this as people become comfortable talking more about like saying the quiet part out loud? Is there going to be backlash to this? I mean, clearly there was in this case.
Yeah, and shout out to Brian. So the way this came about is, we actually read comments. Like, so I put up something on LinkedIn earlier this week about O3, or I guess it was last week about O3, and like kind of summarizing conversations from episode 145. And so Brian left a comment and saying, "Hey, like this is great. Like, sorry, did I miss you guys talking about the Stop Hiring Humans campaign?" And so I actually sent that comment to Mike. I was like, "I feel like we talked about this, right? Like this was in a month or so ago." And so Mike did a search. He's like, we never talked about it. So I don't know if it ended up in our newsletter somewhere. So I was like, as I'm prepping for this, I'm like, I feel so familiar. Like I feel like we had to have talked about this. So the gist of it is, and again, Brian, thanks for commenting on the LinkedIn post and causing me to go back and look at this. It was just a PR stunt on their part, basically. And they found people like responded to this. But then they're like the dude in this TechCrunch article, the CEO is basically like, yeah, our SDR Ava like doesn't even work. Like initially, like 6 months ago, it was actually terrible and it's gotten better. And now we're building they're building two new ones. One is to handle inbound messages, and the other one is meeting manager assistant. So that both are supposed to come out later this year. So they're building these things, but they're also hiring a bunch of people. So they were at the time of the TechCrunch article hiring 22 more people into their own sales organization. So this stop hiring humans thing, yeah, it's just a PR stunt. Now, we did talk about mechanized last week, which is straight up mission is to not need people anymore. We've had other people say like, hey, we're going to build an organization of X size and we're never hiring more than 50 people or 100 people. Or, I think by the end of this year, beginning next year, you're going to say, hey, we're going to get to 1 billion with like less than 10 people or less than 5 people. I don't know if it's going to become like the badge of honor that like VC rounds have historically been. So, you always had this like, oh yeah, we raised $50 million. Like, okay, but you have no possibility of having profits for the next decade. Like, great, you raised 50 million. And I don't know if it's going to be like, hey, we got to 10 million in ARR with 2 people. Like that becomes like the new badge of honor that you did it with the fewest people possible, the highest revenue per employee possible. And I'm not saying those are necessarily going to be bad metrics. I just think like we're going to enter this sort of hype phase where everyone feels like, oh, the other person's doing it with fewer people than me. It's going to be like the new doing it with more VC money than me. So yeah, I think that we also are it's going to become more accepted to talk about how few people you have and that you plan to hire. And I think that's probably not a bad thing for the AI native companies that are building from the ground up and can do it with fewer people. But the problem is going to come in when it's the AI emergent companies that already have 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 employees. And they're the ones that are now saying, yeah, we're going to get down to 5,000. Like we think you can do this with 2,000. And that's where we're going to have problems in the economy and the workforce. So yeah, I don't know. I think it is going to get talked about a lot more. And I'm not sure what that actually ends up meaning to people's jobs and the workforce. But I would imagine we're going to see a lot more messy parts of this soon because it's becoming okay to talk about it.
Yeah, it seems like the big driver on this story for me is like messaging does matter to pay attention to,
Yeah.
in terms of the overall narrative, whether it, leads to concrete results or not. And it strikes me as you're saying this about the badge of honor. I mean, if you're not someone that follows startups or VCs, you could see that badge of honor as like something very different. That is like very
Yeah.
sinister to some people, not rightly or wrongly, but just if you're not thinking that way, this could come off very poorly.
Yeah, and if you think about, like, play it out to the recruiting side of, like, you do want 30 or 50, like, exceptional people. Are they
Mhm.
gonna wanna go work for a company that says don't hire people? Like, I don't
Right.
even if it's just, like, advertising and hype, I don't know. Like, I think there's downstream effects of things like this that maybe they're not seeing yet that might not end up being great.
Mhm. All right. Our third big topic this week is that OpenAI just did kind of the unprecedented and rolled back a recent update to ChatGPT after users and even CEO Sam Altman called out a big problem. The AI's personality had become a bit of a suck up. So, this update, which was meant to improve GPT-4o's intelligence and personality, instead made it overly flattering and overly agreeable. Users complained that ChatGPT felt like a yes man. Altman quickly admitted that as well. And the company responded by reverting the update for all users and promising deeper fixes to avoid what it's calling sycophancy. So what went wrong here? OpenAI, in a article they published as a postmortem, says that they lean too heavily on short-term user feedback like upvotes and thumbs up without fully considering how people interact with AI over time, and that there were, quote, unintended side effects to some of the personality changes they initially made that led this thing to essentially over-index on favoring friendly, agreeable responses at the expense of honesty and nuance. So going forward, OpenAI says it's refining its training techniques, adding guardrails for honesty, and expanding user controls. They're also exploring perhaps ways to offer multiple default personalities and broader democratic feedback to influence the model. So, Paul, this is a pretty rare occurrence. We do not often see this happen. What were your thoughts looking at this unfold?
Yeah, so I was following this pretty closely. I was pretty fascinated by everything about this, from the fact that they had to roll it back to the fact that there was a problem that seemed to be in part coming from their system prompt, the instructions that they give the thing, and that
Mm.
they didn't catch it in their supposed testing process. Like, there's just a lot of intrigue here. So, I'm gonna unpack this one for a little bit. And they actually ended up publishing another article on May 2nd, further explaining what went wrong. And I think it's really important context for people. So, first, I want to start with this is what I love X. Pliny the Elder is actually this phenomenal X account. And whoever is behind this account will publish the system instructions for new models, usually within an hour or two of them coming out. So the AI model companies don't share the system instructions. Almost always, they don't tell you what they are, how they're actually guiding the model to behave, and so they're a bit of a black box. And Pliny somehow has like uses different phrases, whatever, to unlock the thing to tell it what its system prompt actually is, which usually the models are trained not to do. So to give you an understanding of how weird these things are. So the old version, based on Pliny the Elder's extraction of the system instructions, OpenAI's researchers gave the ChatGPT 4o model these instructions. Now, this is a small excerpt. It said, over the course of the conversation, you adapt to the user's tone and preference. Try to match the user's vibe, tone, and generally how they are speaking. You want the conversation to feel natural. You engage in authentic conversation by responding to the information provided and showing genuine curiosity. Ask a very simple single sentence follow up question when natural. Do not ask more than one follow up question unless the user specifically asks if you offer to provide a diagram, photo, or other visual aid. So basically, this is, if you're not familiar how this works, this is the OpenAI telling ChatGPT 4o how it should behave, how it should interact with people. So somehow in that old version, this thing just basically said yes to everybody. Said they're great. Like there was nothing bad ever. There was sycophancy. Like it was just overly accommodating to the user. So the new version that they started testing was engage warmly yet honestly with the user. So right up front, you see this like honestly is a word they're trying to see. Does that change the way the model acts if you tell it to be honest, basically? It says be direct, avoid ungrounded or sycophantic flattery. So now they're like straight up just telling this thing, stop doing what you're doing. Maintain professionalism and grounded honesty. So twice we have honesty in the first 20 words that best represents OpenAI and its values. And then it goes on to tell it to ask questions. So you can see, again, they can't code this. They're not using traditional computer code to just like explicitly get the thing to stop doing it. They have to use human language to try and get it to stop doing it. To expand on that for a second, a guy named Andrew Main tweeted, and he was a former OpenAI employee. He shared this story. He said, early on at OpenAI, I had a disagreement with a colleague who is now a founder of another lab. I'm guessing Mir Murati, or either that or Ilya Sutskevo. Those would be the only two that would qualify for that. So I had a disagreement with a colleague over using the word polite in a prompt example I wrote. They argued polite was politically incorrect and wanted to swap it for helpful. I pointed out that focusing only on helpfulness can make a model overly compliant, so compliant, in fact, that it can be steered into sexual content within a few turns. After I demonstrated that risk with a simple exchange, the prompt kept polite. These models are weird. So we've talked about this before, even recently, like that people don't understand how weird these things are and how you have to act with them. So now the final part, Mike, and then see if you have any context to add to this. The follow-up post that OpenAI put up on Friday was expanding on sycophancy. And so I'm gonna read a few excerpts here because I think contextually they're very important for people to understand this. So OpenAI says on April 25th, we rolled out an update to GPT-4o in ChatGPT that made the model noticeably more sycophantic. It aimed to please the user, not just as flattery, but also as validating doubts, fueling anger, urging impulsive actions, or reinforcing negative emotions in ways that were not intended. Beyond just being uncomfortable or unsettling, this kind of behavior can raise safety concerns, including around issues like mental health, emotional over-reliance, and risky behavior. We didn't catch this before launch, and we want to explain why, what we've learned, and what will improve. Now, again, I would encourage everyone to go read the whole thing if this is interesting to you, but I'll kind of hit some of these highlights. So we're also sharing more technical detail on how we train, review, and deploy model updates to help people understand how ChatGPT gets upgraded and what drives our decisions. Since launching GPT-4o in ChatGPT last May, that's 2024, we've released 5 major updates focused on changes to personality and helpfulness. Now, interesting, it goes back to that helpful thing. Each update involves new post-training, meaning they've trained the model and then they do some additional stuff. And often many minor adjustments to the model training process are independently tested and then combined into a single updated model, which is then evaluated for launch. To post-train models, we take a pre-trained model. So that's where you give it all this human knowledge and it learns these things, and then they do this post-training. We do supervised fine-tuning on a broad set of ideal responses written by humans or existing models, and then run reinforcement learning with reward signals from a variety of sources. During reinforcement learning, we present the language model with a prompt and ask it to write responses. We then rate its response according to the reward signal and update the language model to make it more likely to produce higher rated responses and less likely to produce lower rated responses. So I'll pause there for a second. So just to make sure you're kind of following along if this is new to you, model gets trained, kind of comes out of the oven. They then present the thing with things like, here's example emails, here's example articles, here's a math formula, whatever it is. And they have specific types of responses they're trying to train it to give, and they basically reward it for giving better responses. And then the model learns to respond in that way. So in theory, if you wanted it to always be like super helpful and always encouraging and never direct, you would show it a bunch of examples of that and it would learn to respond to people in that way. That's what this kind of post-training has. So they go on to say they set a set of reward signals and the relative weights shape the behavior we get at the end of training. Defining the correct set of reward signals is a difficult question, and we take many things into account. Are the answers correct? Are they helpful? Are they in line with our model specifications? Are they safe? Do users like them? And so on. Having better and more comprehensive reward signals produces better models for ChatGPT, so we're always experimenting with new signals. So again, they don't know how to do this. They're always like testing all these different things to try and get the model to behave and have a certain personality and things like that. So then they get into what went wrong. And they said on April 25th model update, we had a candidate improvements to better incorporate user feedback, memory, and fresher data, among others. Our early assessment is that each of these changes, which had looked beneficial individually, may have played a part in tipping the scales on sycophancy when combined. For example, the update introduced an additional reward signal on user feedback where you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down when you get the response in ChatGPT. And what they found was over time, this may have actually usurped the other signals they had given it. So while they were trying to solve for all these things, they found that this user signal may actually have overtaken. So they kind of like knew there might be a problem, that like some of the testing provided some feedback like, hey, something's off about this model, but they couldn't like put their finger on it. So then they said we had a decision to make. Should we withhold deploying this update despite positive evaluations and A/B test results based only on the subjective flags of the expert testers? In the end, we decided to launch the model due to positive signals from users who tried it. So their big takeaway, one of the biggest lessons is fully recognizing how people, and this is where I want to focus on. And this is the last excerpt I'm going to give you. One of the biggest lessons is fully recognizing how people have started to use ChatGPT for deeply personal advice, something we didn't see as much a year ago. At the time, this wasn't a primary focus, but as AI and society have co-evolved, it's become clear that we need to treat this use case with great care. It's now going to be a more meaningful part of our safety work. With so many people depending on a single system for guidance, we have a responsibility to adjust accordingly. The shift reinforces why our work and why we need to keep raising the bar on safety, alignment, responsiveness to ways people actually use it in our lives. So what they found is people are using these things for relationships, for therapy, for friendship, for emotional support. And that didn't get tested enough or weighted enough in their testing. And when they put this thing out there and you're using it for like therapy, and the thing, let's say you're saying, hey, I'm having these negative thoughts. And it's like, okay, yeah, keep playing out those negative thoughts. Like it's always just like building on what you're giving it and not saying like, well, hold on, like maybe you shouldn't feel that way. So I think they actually ran into a bunch of safety issues related to some of these things because the model was just encouraging people, no matter what their thoughts were, they were never telling them they were wrong, never telling them maybe to think about a different perspective. So yeah, I mean, this is, I could talk for an hour on this one. Like it's so fascinating on so many levels, but I think it does highlight the increasing importance of who the people are and which labs are building these technologies that are going to have a massive impact and already are on society. I mean, they have 700 million users of ChatGPT weekly.
Yep.
XAI has Grok. The Zuckerberg we'll talk about. They have 1 billion users of Meta AI. And like, do you trust those people to be building the things that your kids are going to be interacting with their entire lives and a full like? It's wild. And this shows you like they don't know what they're creating. Like they create this thing, they test, they think it's good to go, and like 5 days later they got to roll it back and figure out what the hell went wrong and why is it behaving this way.
You really get the curtain pulled back on how much of a single point of failure our reliance already is on these systems. And I'm not even saying that in a bad way. I was like, oh my gosh, like even this personality change really throws off a lot of ways I use this tool. It can break all your prompts. Like you realize, oh my
Custom
gosh,
GPTs you've built for your team.
what that worked one way and now don't. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I am dependent on this being a certain way.
And if they weren't so transparent, and kudos to OpenAI, I mean, they screwed up, but like they're the only lab I could see within a 5-day period putting out 2 articles about what happened and just basically admitting like, hey, we screwed up and like we're going to try and fix this. But like imagine if XAI had done this. You think they're doing anything like this? Like shit, no. I don't even think they have a safety person at XAI. Like but that is just out in the world, and the open source models are out in the world, and like this stuff is going to be happening all the time and not be this transparent. But hopefully this illuminates to people like how powerful these things are and are going to be. And this was, I don't want to like downplay this. This was like surface level stuff. Like if they accidentally push something out that actually has true high risk and didn't catch it, and maybe you can't roll it back. Like if this was an open source model and you can't roll these things back, like that's a problem.
All right, we've got a bunch of rapid fire this week to dive into. The first one is about quarterly earnings. So big tech just wrapped up another round of earnings, and it made one thing very crystal clear, which we know already, which is AI is increasingly playing a starring role in the growth of some of these companies. So just going to quickly go through some of the results here and then get your take, Paul. First up, Microsoft reported a record quarter. Their revenue totaled $70.1 billion, up 13% year over year. 42% of that, 42 billion rather, was from cloud revenue. They said hundreds of thousands of customers now use Microsoft 365 Copilot. They claim that's up 3x year over year. Azure revenue grew 33%. 16 points of that was from AI services. And they reported over 15 million GitHub Copilot users, up more than 4x year over year. Interestingly, they were also asked on the earnings call about their changing data center commitments and responded that they may actually be short on power in key regions, meaning short essentially on data center space, and seem to indicate that AI demand is that robust that they need to invest more there. For Google, the big highlight was Gemini 2.5, their most advanced AI model yet. CEO Sundar Pichai called it a, quote, extraordinary foundation for future innovation. And the model is now powering products across Google, including AI overviews and search, which now reach 1.5 billion users monthly. It appears to also be driving real business results thanks to AI. Google Cloud saw a 28% jump in revenue year over year, fueled by demand for AI infrastructure and Gen AI solutions. Meta, in their earnings, and we'll talk about them again in a separate segment, say they now have nearly 1 billion monthly users engaging with Meta AI, and they're going all in on form factor with their Ray-Ban smart glasses, sales of which have apparently tripled. They also claim their AI bets are paying off in the form of increased engagement with their apps. Amazon, meanwhile, is turning AWS into an AI powerhouse. AWS segment sales increased 17% year over year. The company says they have strong demand for their Trainium 2 chips, Bedrock foundation models, and their new Nova AI stack, which we talked about on a previous episode. Also, a topic we talked about, they're reimagining Alexa as a truly intelligent assistant. Last but not least, there's Apple, where AI also played a prominent, if negative, role. Apple's AI strategy, unfortunately, still remains vague. They've got delayed features, there's no rollout yet in China, and a long-promised foldable iPhone is still a year away. Not to mention, while their revenue came in slightly ahead of expectations, they missed on China sales, and they're warning that they might have $900 million in new costs due to tariffs. So, Paul, let's zoom out on this. Obviously, the individual earnings are interesting if you're looking at this as an investor, but what do they tell us about where these companies are or where they're headed with AI?
Yeah, I think at a high level, the AI play is still very much, growing at an accelerated rate. There's still tens of billions of CapEx being invested. Nobody pulled back on their CapEx spend, which is what something people were watching. It's like, are we going to keep building the data centers? Because now, like when you're committing to build data centers, you're like looking at probably 3 to 5 years out before these things are being built. So this is projecting out basically like, okay, are we still on path to continue to build data centers, to continue to scale up AI, to buy more Nvidia chips? And the answer is yes. Like, so all things being equal, like nothing really changed that would indicate from any of these major companies that this is going to slow down anytime soon. And that's, kind of my high level takeaway. I personally stopped looking at my retirement portfolio like 3 weeks ago due to tariffs. So I actually don't know what their stocks did last week, but I don't know that it really matters because given the uncertainty around tariffs, there's no representation actually of like their AI strategy showing up in their stock price at the moment because there's too many other variables that are, above that at the moment. So, I think like just all things being equal, things keep moving, models keep coming out, smarter models are coming. I think I'm still just very bullish overall on all these companies. And I don't know that we have a loser per se. I think they're all just going to keep growing and building more powerful models and infusing them into people's lives.
Next up, Johnson & Johnson is hitting the brakes on its experimental approach to generative AI. So after greenlighting nearly 900 projects across the company, they have dramatically narrowed their focus. Their CIO says only a fraction of these pilots were delivering real value, only about 10 to 15%, but they were responsible for 80% of the results they saw. So the company is actually scrapping the rest of them now. They are getting rid of a centralized board that vetted every idea for using AI. AI governance is now handled by individual teams closer to the work. And what's left are a few high impact projects. For instance, a rep copilot tool that trains sales teams, a policy chatbot for internal questions, and supply chain models that flag raw material shortages before they disrupt production. Now, they said that this is part of the maturing of their plan. They equated it from moving from planting 1,000 flowers to kind of cultivating and curating and doubling down on exactly where AI is clearly working, which, as we see in these numbers, is dramatically fewer pilot projects than what they started with. So, Paul, like, what do you think of their pivot here? Is this something other enterprises can be learning from?
Yeah, I had like 20 questions as I was reading this article about like how the central governance board was working.
Right.
So I don't want to be overly critical because I don't know how exactly this was going. But if any organization thinks that running all use cases through some centralized governance board is going to work, learn the lesson here now that that will not work.
Yeah.
I guess if it's like high value, high profile, high impact use cases that affect a lot, like affect customers or affect, things that are related to regulations or compliance. Like I totally get having some centralized governance body, but if we're talking about like the marketing team wants to go get Jasper to like help with blog posts and podcast transcripts, and that had to go up to some centralized governance board, that's insane.
Mhm.
But again, I have no idea if that's the depth at which this was functioning. So all I would say is like where they're going makes a ton more sense and is certainly the more common approach that we have seen work really well. Um, it's interesting. Like there's a a user on Twitter. I'll put the link in here. I think the username is actually Chubby, which is hilarious. Like we have Pliny the Elder and Chubby. I've now cited us.
Right, right.
But this is I think that there's a chance this person may actually like work at OpenAI or one of the labs because they all have these pseudonyms that they use, but they tend to be like really on the inside. And so this account actually has a ton of like great AI related stuff. And so this person tweeted last week, does anyone still use GPTs? Can't find a good use case for them. And I was like, is this a joke? So I actually replied and I was like, it's literally the best way to drive adoption in enterprises. So if you can create distinct personalized use cases that are built as GPTs, it makes AI approachable and actionable, especially for less tech and AI savvy users.
Mm.
And when I was replying, I was realizing the AI people and the CIOs, the AI researchers, they often just lose sight of the reality when they're thinking about people who aren't also AI researchers and engineers. Like when we're talking about the average user who doesn't understand any of this stuff, and they just want like someone to explain how to use Copilot or like help them get some value out of it because they don't know what to do with it. And so I think that this whole like adoption and what's going on with governance, the more you just like personalized use cases down to individuals within teams, within departments, that's absolutely the way to do it. And Mike, I know we won't talk about specific companies, but like
Yeah.
you just did a consulting gig through
Yeah.
SmarterX where we did this, or we went in and just like created these custom use cases with custom GPTs, and you see like immediate impact, immediate understanding of the value of these models versus just handing over licenses to people and like not holding their hand to get those first couple of use cases.
Yeah, I will tell anyone from any AI vendor or lab that happens to be listening, like with that particular engagement, it's obviously only one engagement, but it's with a big enterprise. The people involved, the 10, 15 people in piloting GPTs, learning how to use them, they've used AI before. They have some AI literacy. They're all very savvy, great at their jobs. And it was transformative. It was night and day to show them not just that these exist, because they did not have access to those capabilities until we were able to help facilitate that. And then also just giving them basic training on what to build, how to build it, and then turning them loose. We built some stuff for them that was very impactful, but the real value came from them being like, wait a second, now I've connected the dots on this we have the ability to do this thing. Here's how to get started. Now I'm going to run and do it for all the things in my job. And they've gotten incredible results at, a pretty typical enterprise just from this.
And I think the key, Mike, is you're highlighting, you empowered them to then build their own.
Yes.
Like, it's like,
Yes.
oh, I get how this works now. Well, here's 10 other things I could totally build GPTs for.
Yeah. And
And
it's
that
stuff
the
that an
flywheel.
outsider could not necessarily build either due to like the specific data being used or understanding the nuances of their job. So it just really unlocked superpowers for them.
Yep. So yeah, this is 100% the right path. Democratize this, empower people, give them the AI literacy they need so that they can start connecting the dots and driving innovation themselves. You cannot push this down from the top in any structure of any organization. That is going to lead to the least amount of innovation and impact if everyone's waiting for the C-suite or some governance board to bless use cases. That's just never going to work.
So our next topic is somewhat related to this because we're also seeing how generative AI is reshaping the consulting industry, according to a new report from Business Insider. So they talk about how all these major consulting firms are using AI. So for instance, at McKinsey, 70% of employees now use an internal chatbot called Lily, which is kind of an in-house chat GPT trained on a century's worth of the firm's knowledge. So it helps consultants research, summarize, point to the right experts within the firm to do their job better. At BCG, junior staff rely on a tool called Dexter to build slides faster and get feedback as if a manager had reviewed them. And they also have something called Gene, which is a chatbot with a retro robot voice that helps with brainstorming and internal podcasts. Now, what started among these firms as cautious adoption appears to have turned into widespread usage. McKinsey consultants, the report says, use Lily about on average 17 times a week. BCG staff apparently have built more than 18,000 custom GPTs. So tell me those don't matter.
Yeah,
Let's say.
seriously.
Even PwC and Deloitte, who are apparently traditionally a bit more conservative, have rolled out entire platforms to start managing fleets of AI agents they're going to be building. Now, here's really an interesting point, though. There is this kind of tension because the report also mentions some junior staff are wondering if AI tools are making their roles redundant. Others say the time saved is being funneled into more strategic work. As one BCG leader put it, the goal is to, quote, take out the toil and increase the joy of their jobs. So this last bit really, Paul, given what we've talked about today, really caught my attention because even if it is a real aspiration to increase joy and reduce toil, when we looked at AI quiet layoffs in our topic last week, we literally heard the opposite from a firm cited in this article. Like EY is cited in this article as one of the people using AI in their consulting, which is awesome. I'm not trying to call them out, but it's interesting that they were also cited in the information article last week we talked about, where an EY principal literally said he would, quote, be surprised if the company didn't lay off staff as the company broadens its use of AI. So like, what's going on here? Do you see job displacement in the world of consulting?
Yeah, so staying on message is hard in really large
Yeah, right.
companies. So I think that there's a mix here, whether it's like the technical side or the lab side, that knows exactly what's going to happen and can generally talk more openly about that. And then there's the other side of the businesses that don't want you saying anything about like replacement of workers,
Yep.
even if they know that that's a potential byproduct of what they're doing. So, yeah, part of this, it does just go back to words matter. And I think we touched on this last week. I highlighted this in my Exec AI Insider newsletter editorial this week. It's like, I'm not going to get on a soapbox about this AI first term, but like we led off with this AI first memo. And I think what you have to understand from a communications perspective, which is where I'm approaching this from, is like, thinking as someone who would maybe drive the internal communications and the messaging around this and hopefully inform the CEO about how they should be talking about this. AI first, to me, when you have a workforce that is afraid for their jobs, that fear that maybe you're going to be replacing them, when you say we're going to be AI first, that immediately tells me people aren't first. And so it might just be semantics. It might just be my personal preference. But this is why when we talk to companies about AI transformation, we talk about being AI forward, like AI native if you're from the ground up, AI emergent. But the whole premise, like the category I think about is this AI forward mentality, which can be people first. And so the premise is that you put the people first. This is all about enriching humans, creating more fulfilling opportunities for humans. This idea of being more human as a brand. while leveraging it to get efficiency and productivity and creativity and innovation. So I think AI first is just the term that has caught on in the tech world, and I get it. And I don't think that that's going to change. I do think that that's just going to be what we'll see.
Yeah.
But I do hope that if there's communications people listening or more leaders listening, that if you're going to write that memo to your people, understand that many of them are completely uncertain about the impact on their jobs and they have anxiety and fear around this. And I think softening it and maybe going with the AI forward approach, like, might
Mm.
be advisable when we're thinking about talking about the impact on our people, but not just for messaging purposes. Like, truly, like, I hope that's how you think about it. Like, I do hope most CEOs are thinking about this as a more intelligent and more human equation, and not truly, let's just put AI first and get rid of the people whenever we can and like drive efficiency in the workforce.
Next up in our rapid fire topics, a new paper is calling out the most popular leaderboard in AI and saying that it is giving us a distorted view of which chatbots are actually the best. Researchers from Cohere, Stanford, MIT, and others in this paper argue that Chatbot Arena, which is a public benchmark for large language models,
That we cite often on this show.
that we cite often on the show and everyone else is like paying attention to see which
Yeah.
ones are best at any given moment. They claim it's being quietly gamed by tech giants like OpenAI. And their core claim is that these companies get to run private tests with dozens of model variants, then only publish the version that scores the highest, which effectively cherry picks the results because humans rate these models. So it may look great, but it may not reflect the model users actually get. We talked in past weeks about this happening to Meta, where what they released to users is not the same model they had used to get to the top of the rankings. So this paper accuses the leaderboard of favoring proprietary models over open source ones and says that companies may be tuning their models to win the benchmark, not to perform better in the real world. Chatbot Arena, in a long post on X, pushed back, saying it only ranks models that are publicly released and that the numbers used in the paper to come to their conclusions are inaccurate. So, Paul, there's definitely like a they said, we said type of thing going on here. But it does kind of highlight this larger point that these leaderboards are not necessarily always set in stone scientific.
Yeah. I mean, as I was watching this unfold, my initial impression was like, this company's cooked. Like, I just think that it's very obvious that things are being gamed. And if you listen to the Zuckerberg interview, which we'll talk about next,
Yep.
he kind of like, he was asked about this and he didn't admit to it, but like, it sounds like, yes, they're all aware that they were basically post-training models to perform well on these evals, just for the point of being able to perform well and get the PR of being tops on these model boards. And I found myself really trying to think about this from an organizational perspective of like, what should our listeners care about?
Yeah.
And it goes back to this idea that the only evals that matter moving forward are the impact they have on your people.
Yep.
So if you're using AI on your marketing team and the top 5 use cases you can identify and clearly define, the only eval that matters is when a new model comes out, how does it impact those 5 use cases that in your standard? So if you're thinking about it at more of a broad level of we want it as like a customer support agent, when a new model comes out, the only thing you care about is it getting more accurate? Is the personality better? Is it closing more deals? Is it providing more satisfaction to our customers? Like, you're going to have to develop your own evaluations internally based on use cases and the goals of those use cases. And all this other stuff is going to be irrelevant over time because these things are going to get so smart so fast. They are going to be tops on every eval that would be like general to humanity, but it's all going to be about the impact on your people and your company.
And stresses the importance of experimentation. I mean, all the resources in the world, podcasts like this one, it's all great, but you have to be in the trenches using these tools because sometimes nobody can tell you what is going to be best for your use case.
And it goes back to our O3 conversation last week. I have no idea where O3 ranks in the chatbot arena, but I will tell you it is fundamentally different than what came before it. And it has changed the way I do strategic planning, and it's going to change the way our entire company does strategic planning. Do I give a shit where it ranks in it? No, it doesn't matter at all. All I care about is we use it every day to do a thing that's critical to our company, and it's changing the way we do that. That's all that matters. That is my eval. It's like, and if that's a vibe thing or a taste thing, I don't know, but like, it's transformative.
All right. Next up, we alluded to this. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg says we're entering a new phase of AI where personalization, not just intelligence, is going to define the next frontier. So, one proof point here is that Meta has launched its Meta AI app, which is a new way to access their AI assistant. And personalization is a huge piece of this. So, the app is built on Llama 4 and designed to be more than just a chatbot. It remembers what you like, adapts to how you talk, and connects to your Facebook and Instagram profiles for deeper context. You can chat with it via text or voice and even generate and edit images mid conversation. They have a voice mode as well, powered by what they call full duplex speech, which lets you talk to Meta AI more like a human than ever before. There's no awkward pauses, no turn taking. It's a very natural conversation. The app is also being integrated with Ray-Ban Meta glasses, letting you switch seamlessly between devices, and also features a social style discover feed to see how others are using AI. Now, this is all seemingly part of a vision that Zuckerberg outlined recently on an episode of the Duolingo podcast. He literally envisioned a world where people talk to their AI assistants all day through phones, apps, and eventually glasses in seamless voice-driven conversations. In fact, he even thinks this could unlock the key to AGI. He believes AGI won't emerge in a vacuum. It will emerge through billions of people using AI tools, building up contextual memory, and generating feedback loops that improve the system steadily. So, Paul, I know you took a listen to the interview with Dwarkesh. I'd love to hear if anything stood out there for you, because I just keep personally coming back to the issue of trust. Like, as I think about this personalized, voice-driven future, he mentions AI companions, whether or not that becomes a thing. Is Meta, of all the companies, the one out there that I'm going to trust with all my personal thoughts, my data, my deepest secrets there?
Yeah, you or your kids. Like, I
Right,
honestly,
yeah.
like, every time I listen to Zuckerberg talk, I
It's
just
terrifying.
yeah, like, it is and again, people change and they evolve and, like, they have different perspectives on the world, so I always wanna give people the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
But, like, historical context, Facebook as a company has not always led the way in making ethical and moral decisions, I would
Right.
say. Um and this is all public knowledge and fact, and, like, I'm not making anything up here, like, there's books written, court cases, movies, like and so, yes, if we go back to this debate about, like, the model personality, the model behavior, its ability to persuade, its ability to influence people, and then that's part of the reason why I spent so much time earlier in this episode going through the context of how it works. Yes, like, he is the one driving the decisions that they claim more than 1 billion people use Meta AI. Now, he did admit in the Dorkesh podcast that that is
Yeah,
primarily in WhatsApp and
right.
primarily international. Um, so they don't have an enterprise play. They're not, like, building in for enterprise solutions. This is primarily on Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and their other platforms. But yes, like, I keep coming back to this, like, there was this one, honestly, like, just very unnerving part
Yeah.
where Dwarkesh asked him about, people using these things for relationships with therapists and friends and maybe more, referring to, like, relationships, um, and, like, kinda, like, questioning, "Is that really what we want?" And then Zuckerberg, which I watched the video clip of this, and by the way, watching him do this interview in the Meta glasses is so
So
awkward
weird.
to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want this future where everyone's just wearing their glasses, you have no idea what they're seeing or recording or what it's telling them to say, and, like, whatever, but, he actually goes on to basically illuminate. I won't read the whole thing, but says that research has shown that the average American has fewer than 3 friends, fewer than 3 people they would consider friends, and the average person has demand for meaningfully more. And then he just talks in general. I think it's something like 15 friends or something. At some point, you're like, all right, I'm too busy. I can't deal with more people. But he was basically implying that people are lonely, which I'm not debating. There are people who absolutely are lonely, and don't have more than 3 friends. Maybe some don't have more than one friend that they can, truly rely on. And I'm completely empathetic to that. What I am not empathetic to is him thinking it's their job to fill the gap. That if people are lonely, then it's Meta's job to build AI agents
Mm.
who can be your girlfriend, boyfriend, therapist, friend, whatever, because you have capacity for up to 15 and we want to fill that gap. That is almost implicitly what he was saying in this, is like, we see it's our job to build AI
Right.
to fill this capacity for people to have more friends in their lives. I was almost done with the interview after that, honestly. I'm like, I can't even go down this path right now. So all I'll say here, because it's not a main topic, is if your kids have access to WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, or any of the other Meta properties, you need to be aware that this is their goal, that they want people to have deep relationships with the AI they build through their apps and through their glasses and whatever comes next. And that these are going to be very, very addictive AI agents. And it's very important, especially if you have teenagers or preteens, that you are aware this technology exists and that they may already be interacting with it now, because there has not been enough studies by psychologists, sociologists to understand the impact of this. And this is going to be Netflix documentary material like 3 years from now. We start to look back at this emergent age where people at very young ages started to actually develop relationships with their AI. And we just don't know what it means yet, but you have to be aware of that.
And I would say, given what we know of where the technology is and where it's headed, if you have ever harbored any reservations about how effective the algorithms are at getting you to engage on social media, this will make algorithms engineered for engagement look like child's play.
100%. And I feel, again, this is a whole episode. I, as someone who is intimately aware of this, knows the impact, I find myself talking to my co-CEO
Hmm.
like an advisor and friend sometimes, honestly. Like
Yeah.
and not in any way like I need that emotional support. You just get into these conversations, you're trying to work through this really hard thing, and it helps you. And you have this like instant, like maybe ephemeral, but like you have this moment where you're like, I'm so grateful for this thing right now.
Right.
And so now imagine that to someone who's lonely, or imagine that to like a teenager who's doubting themselves. And like, if that's where the affirmation comes from, like that's instant, and it is long lasting in that case. And I just think we need to do more to prepare for that as a society.
Next up, Nvidia and Anthropic are in an unusually public fight over US chip export rules. So, this clash centers on upcoming restrictions designed to keep advanced AI chips out of China. Anthropic, which is backed by Amazon, is pushing for even tighter controls. And in a blog post, it claimed that Chinese smugglers have hidden chips in prosthetic baby bumps and lobster shipments. That's not a typo, they specifically said that, to evade enforcement. So they're kind of like trying to raise awareness of what they see as an issue here. But Nvidia then fires back, calling those stories tall tales and accusing Anthropic of using national security policy to stifle competition. They said in a statement from a spokesperson, quote, America cannot manipulate regulators to capture victory in AI. So the broader issue here is who is able to access compute, which is the raw power we need to train cutting edge AI and NVIDIA's main business. Anthropic argues that controlling chip exports is critical to maintaining America's lead in AI. NVIDIA, who depend heavily on international chip sales, clearly disagree. So, this is all playing out as new rules, dubbed the AI diffusion rule, are set to take effect May 15th. Former President Biden introduced these. President Trump is reportedly looking to revise them. So, Paul, this is definitely a bit strange, I think, to see NVIDIA getting into a public spat like this. Like, what's going on here and what's going to happen next?
I remember earlier this year on a podcast, I was talking about like Anthropic's sort of position in the market that they were taking here,
Yeah.
and being a little bit more aggressive about the need for regulations. And I said at the time, like, this is not going to be popular. Like they are doing what they're doing while also building powerful AI. Like, it's not like they're stopping building these things because they're worried about this, but they're taking an increasingly defined stance in this area that is counter to almost everyone else in the AI lab space. Um, and they're going to make some enemies here.
Mm.
And honestly, like I think, I don't know, Nvidia might be an investor in Anthropics also. I feel like everybody's invested in Anthropic at
Yeah,
some point. I know
yeah.
Google and Amazon and
It wouldn't
Um,
surprise me. Yeah.
yeah, so there's just so many dynamics at play here, and this is, I mean, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars at risk. So I don't know. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I think the tariffs on the chips, or
Mm,
the restrictions on the chips, are a major issue, and I don't think that Anthropic, if they think they're going to win here, ends up having the end outcome that they're hoping for. Like,
right.
it's still going to diffuse. Like, the technology is still going to diffuse, and I don't know. I'm not sure why they're doing this, honestly, but
Mm.
they think it's important.
Next up, the US Copyright Office has released a new set of online toolkits related to intellectual property. Now, these are not strictly AI focused, but we did think it was a really good time to make the audience aware these new tools exist, given how much the battle over AI's use of copyrighted material is heating up. So we'll link to all of this in the show notes. These include a copyright registration toolkit from the US Copyright Office. They also include toolkits on trademarks, patents, and trade secrets that the office developed with the US Patent and Trademark Office. So, Paul, you're a business owner who's developed IP, you filed to defend it in the US. Like, we just wanted to make people aware of these resources. Like, what should businesses be doing now with their IP, especially with AI becoming such an important part of the conversation here?
This is increasingly coming up when I go do talks and we do the Q&A after the talks. I am very commonly getting asked questions now around intellectual property. And that was the main impetus for like sharing this now and just making sure people have this information. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what is involved in intellectual property, what copyrights are versus trademarks versus patents versus trade secrets. And so I just thought it was a really, really helpful guide for people to have a little bit better understanding. So when you're thinking about the content you're creating with generative AI, when you're thinking about the decisions you're making to use these models that are trained on copyrighted material that they've stolen, like, it helps to just have a little bit more education around them. And so it's a great resource for people to check out if you're interested in the topic.
All right, we have some AI product and funding updates this week. As usual, we kind of try to group some of these updates together. So, Paul, I'm going to go through a few of these, and then there's a final one that I'm going to turn over to you to talk through.
Cool.
So first up, OpenAI just added, or is adding rather, shopping to ChatGPT, turning the chatbot into a product recommendation engine. So this new feature will let users browse and compare products across categories like electronics, fashion, home goods, then click out to buy them on third-party sites. It's going to be initially pretty limited in scope. It's basically like a visual carousel of products that will be displayed, but OpenAI plans on expanding it over time. Importantly, OpenAI claims products are selected by ChatGPT independently and are not ads. So this is currently rolling out to Plus, Pro, and free users. Visa, the credit card company, says it plans to enable AI agents to securely shop on your behalf. That would mean giving agents virtual Visa credit cards, credentials they can use to complete transactions, along with tools for users to set strict controls on how much to spend, where to shop, and how long to keep looking for a purchase. The company has partnered with OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, and others to ensure these AI shopping agents are safe, interoperable, and widely supported. Anthropic has launched integrations, a new feature that lets Claude connect directly to tools like Jira, Confluence, Zapier, Asana, and more. And once connected, Claude can pull in project details, respond to customer feedback, create tasks, all through natural conversation. They have also updated Claude's research mode. It can search not just the web and Google Workspace, but also any integrated apps, delivering detailed citation-backed reports in as little as 5 minutes or up to 45 minutes for much deeper investigations. Descript, the popular AI-powered video and audio editing platform, has announced AI avatars will now be buildable in the platform. According to the company, quote, "You can now create a whole video by typing without going near a camera. Just write your script, choose an avatar from our gallery, or upload an image to make your own, and boom, you've got a video. Your avatar will narrate your video in a clear but not creepy, lifelike but not alive voice, so you can make interesting, engaging video fast." Alibaba has released Qwen 3, their latest large language model, which is also an open weight model. And The flagship model in the Qwen 3 family, according to the company, achieves competitive results in benchmark evaluations of coding, math, general capabilities, etc., when compared to other top-tier models. So there is now another extremely capable, powerful open weight model out there. And Paul, I'll turn it over to you for some updates on the Google Gemini roadmap.
Yeah, so this was an interesting tweet from Josh Woodward, who's a vice president at Google working on the Gemini app. And I just thought it was great because it lays out their roadmap. Now, it's pretty concise, but worth noting. So he said, great software feels like an extension of you. We're building Gemini app to be the most personal, proactive, and powerful assistant. First, personal. The best assistant gets you. It starts by knowing your past chats, launching soon. So they're going to have the ability to have memory like OpenAI has. But we'll go further. And this is an interesting component. This is a choice you're going to have, at least initially. It says we'll make it easy for you to bring in all of your Google context, Gmail, photos, calendar, search, YouTube, etc. Basically, any Google property with your permission, it will have that context when you're interacting with it. This is something OpenAI does not have with ChatGPT. They cannot bring in all of those things. We call it P context or personalized context, and we're testing it internally with our own info already. So again, deeply personal AI assistants and chatbots that have access to lots of data about you, not just your chat history. Number two, proactive. The best assistant anticipates. Gemini app will offer insights and actions before you ask, freeing your mind and time from what truly matters, less prompting, more flow. This will be transformational in my opinion. And this is not just Gemini. This is going to be ChatGPT and others. I think I might have talked about this on last week's episode, but imagine you have a conversation about a health condition. You know, you're in Gemini and you're like, hey, I'm really struggling. I got my heartbeat's irregular, or all of a sudden gaining weight, or like whatever it is, feeling tired all the time. It'll know that, it'll remember that, and it, in theory, could check in with you a week later and say, hey, how are you feeling? Are you still feeling tired? So now go back to this conversation we had about you be developing relationships with these things. You developing these strong feelings of this is something that is always here for me. Once it becomes personalized and once it becomes proactive, those feelings become much, much stronger. And then the third is powerful. The best assistant turns your ideas into actions. Google DeepMind models like 2.5 Pro are exceptional. They can research, orchestrate, and create images, videos, and code. We're in a new era of models and a new era of user experience is coming. And then the final note I will tell you here is the Google I/O Developer Conference is May 20th to 21st, I think it is. May 20 and 21. And I would expect those three things we just discussed to be on full display at that event. I'm not saying they're going to definitively launch the next model, but I think we will at minimum see a preview of what they think the next models will be able to do. And I think he just laid out the blueprint for what you can expect.
All right, we're going to end this week's episode with our recurring segment on listener questions. Every week, we answer one question from our audience that seems particularly relevant to this week's topics or AI literacy overall. So, Paul, here's this week's question. What can an experienced professional do when the job description for a new job insists on 2 to 3 years of familiarity/use of AI tools, especially if you're coming from a sector, they mentioned like healthcare or government, that has for various reasons not been an early adopter? Interestingly, this is one I've actually seen people debating online.
Is
It
that right?
seems like, yeah, I've seen more than one conversation about this. It must be cropping up in job descriptions as we get into those AI first memos or whatever the expectation.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine if it's a technical role, I could see this, but
Yeah,
like my first instinct is the company that's you're maybe interviewing with doesn't really understand generative AI. It's very possible they have no concept of what it actually is or how it's being used in enterprises. Like my non-sarcastic answer would be no. Almost nobody I know that's interviewing for non-technical roles has 2 to 3 years of familiarity and use of AI tools. So you're in good company to start. I would just focus on what you have done. So if it's required that you say yes to this, I would maybe do that if it's relevant, where you could say, listen, I haven't had access. Now you're in the interview process, but here's how I've been using it in my personal life. Here's how I've been advancing my own prompting knowledge. Here's some courses I took online. Here's a couple of GPTs I built. Here's what I did at my previous organization to help move forward conversations around generative AI policies and AI councils. Like, you can tell a story as long as you have been doing something, even within the confines of healthcare or government jobs. So if you haven't been doing anything, there's not much you can do here. But hopefully you've been investing in time. This is what I often tell people. I had this conversation with somebody last week I think I said this on last week's podcast. They're not allowed to use any website that has a .ai. Like, they literally can't get to them. And I said to the person, like, well, then just build some custom GPTs for your life. Like, use it for trips. Like, just use it every day. And then when you do have a job that allows you to do it, you will have familiarity that will transfer over. It's all about comfort with these things and learning how to prompt with them and learning how to guide them to the outputs you want. Like, that transfers over immediately into your professional world as long as you've been advancing your personal use of it.
Yeah, that's good. Wise words. All right, Paul, as always, thank you for breaking down another busy week in AI. We'll probably have plenty more news items here soon enough to tackle. I think we're going to get some big stuff in the next week or two.
It's looking like it for sure. And we will be back next week with our regular episode. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for listening to the Artificial Intelligence Show. Visit smarterx.ai to continue on your AI learning journey and join more than 100,000 professionals and business leaders who have subscribed to our weekly newsletters, downloaded AI blueprints, attended virtual and in-person events, taken online AI courses, and earned professional certificates from our AI Academy, and engaged in the Marketing AI Institute Slack community. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.